While the autobiographical sense of self and the mental image of self take place in the mind, they are inextricably linked with the embodied self and the social self. The embodied self and body awareness are necessary for every aspect of animal life. While we are all born into the world as pure awareness, we gradually become aware of the fact that we have a body that is separate from other bodies. That we are an individual in relation to other individuals, and that we are part of a social group. Animal societies are made up of relationships between individuals. And the social self is fundamental to these relationships. The lives of social animals revolve around the social self. From determining one's social status and competing with one's rivals, to choosing one's partner and defending one's territory, animal life revolves around the me. What do these animals make of themselves when they look in a mirror, see their reflection in water, hear their own or another's song or howl, or smell themselves and others? Is it possible that self-awareness, wow, that's me, is a uniquely human trait? Scientific evidence is revealing that this trait has been around since long before humans. Researchers have demonstrated that fish think, "It's me," when they see themselves in a picture. Although different species have different ways of recognizing themselves and each other based on their predominant senses, recognizing individuals is fundamental to animal life. Every animal born into the group is recognized as an individual. Remembering individuals' identities plays a critical role in the group dynamics of species living in complex social groups. Studies found that the initial state of recognition is surprisingly powerful. Chicks are born with the ability to recognize a familiar face and are sensitive to changes in the face's age, gender, and orientation. Ducklings are able to identify their siblings by sight. And juvenile gray-legged geese also discriminate between individual siblings. Pigs recognize others by their individual scent and voice. A mother pig learns to recognize her piglets individually within a day of their birth. Her piglets can recognize her individual voice and recognize their own names by the time they're 2 weeks old. Researchers proved pigs' ability to learn their own names and respond to individual names that they gave them. Different species have many different ways of naming or identifying each other. Dolphins have their own signature whistle. Chimps can identify each other by their own individual pant hoot. Elephants have unique names for each other. Ravens have personal identification calls they use to announce their presence to other ravens. Other ravens also address the speaker using its personal identification call. They remember the names of other ravens for years, even if they've had no contact. Wild parrots name their babies. Researchers found that parents gave chicks their own call while in the nest, which the chicks learned and chirped back at the parents. Cows have their own unique voice that others use to identify them. For horses, whinnies act very much like names. Squirrels have their own distinctive call, and they use these calls to recognize one another. Other species have multiple ways of recognizing others and themselves. And these are dynamic and can be learned. Animals from sheep, rats, chickens, and dogs can learn the names that humans give them. Cats know their own names, their owners' names, and each other's names. The recognition of self and others can take many different forms. Birds recognize individuals' songs. And each individual bird has its own song repertoire. Elephants use odor, not just to identify individuals, but also their location, state of health, and social status. Squirrels not only use their noses to tell relatives from strangers, but can discriminate degrees of relatedness. There is a whole world of recognition and self-recognition taking place in the world of smell. Rats can recognize individual cats and rats by odor. They recognize their own individual odor and rub their own tears and saliva on their fur to increase their personal scent. Deer recognize the odor of individuals, just like we recognize a face of individual people. They leave their own scent for others by scraping and licking tree branches and pawing leaves. With a sense of smell 1,000 times better than ours, the world of deer scent communication is much more complicated than many people might assume. Deer don't need social media to let everyone know where they have been, where they are going, or their current relationship status. But they do have a specialized sensory system that relies on chemical compounds to convey similar information. Animals are well aware of the fact that they have their own body, scent, and voice. And they are well aware of the fact that others are perceiving it, which is why they spend much of their time trying to hide or disguise it from others. Foxes living in the mountains of California have been filmed deliberately rubbing themselves in the scent marks left by mountain lions to fool coyotes, as foxes know they rely on smell when hunting. Squirrels hide their identity by chewing up shed rattlesnake skin and spreading it on their fur. Others disguise themselves visually. Crabs shape sponges to fit over their heads and bodies and dress up in everything from algae to sea urchins to deter predators. Animals plan their lives around the behavior of predators by constantly minimizing cues of their presence and figuring out when and where it is safe to go. By being active at different times of the day to a predator, they will even change the times they forage depending on the moonlight to remain unseen. Being aware of one's body and how others are perceiving it is essential for animals. They know when they are being sized up. They know when they are being looked at. And they respond to eye contact. They are aware of who they make eye contact with, because eye contact can be used for bonding or challenging depending on the individuals. Animals have to be aware of their body's strengths and limitations. They learn from each other through physical interaction. They train and practice to prepare their bodies for defense and competition. And they show them off to potential rivals and predators, letting them know that it would be a waste of time and energy attempting an attack. For example, Stotting in gazelles acts as a signal of physical fitness and likelihood of escaping attack. Animals have to know the strength and limitations of their bodies, not just for defense and competition, but also for long journeys and migrations. Body condition affects when and where they choose to migrate. They have to be aware of their state of health and protect their bodies from diseases, infections, and parasites. In some cases, they use plants or other natural items as drugs in a very similar way to ourselves in order to treat the very same symptoms that we do. Birds eat antiparasitic plants and protect their nests from mite invasion by importing certain chemical-emitting plants. City birds have learned how to use the nicotine in cigarette butts to line their nests and keep out ticks. Birds anoint their bodies with insecticides, fungicides, and antibacterials, using substances from mothballs to crushed up ants and millipedes. Bears make a paste with osha roots and rub it on their fur to repel insects and soothe bites. And spider monkeys self-anoint with the leaves of 3 species of plants to signal their social status and increase their attractiveness. Some birds add material to their feathers to change their appearance, much like makeup. White-feathered bearded vultures rub their heads and necks in iron-rich soil, which gives them a reddish-brown hue. Flamingos, like all birds, produce oil in glands near their tails. Birds daub this oil onto their feathers with their beaks during the mating season. The deeper the pink, the more attractive the bird. Social life revolves around body awareness, and animals use their bodies to communicate. Exchange of information by means of body language is widespread in nature. Body language is used to vote on group decisions, such as direction of travel or social hierarchy. In animal societies, the roles and status of individuals can be dynamic and complex and change depending on the situation. While dominance can remain with one individual for years at a time, leadership, in terms of deciding where a group goes, for instance, is much more fluid in many animal groups. Transfer of power is common in the context of leadership, but often rare in terms of dominance. Where the group goes requires all individuals to reach consensus, and a large number of subordinates can easily override the dominant's preference. The dynamic and complex nature of animal societies requires an acute awareness of both oneself and others. Social life requires an awareness that one's own behavior can induce certain actions in others. This involves more than the agency aspect of bodily self-awareness, for it implicates an awareness of others as doers or actors, an important component of social self-awareness. Relationships evolve in their complexity over time. Individuals remember favors and grudges, have long-term relationships, and build and shift alliances. What young members of the species have to learn about social life is extensive and time-consuming. Young dolphins must undergo extensive learning about the conventions and rules of the society, about cooperative and collaborative activities, and about the identities and even personalities of group members. Collaborative activity requires different roles, such as driver dolphins, barrier dolphins, and broker dolphins, who act as links of communication among various subgroups within the larger social unit. Animal groups and societies are made up of individuals, and social self-awareness is part of everyday life. That your own actions can influence those of others is an insight of social understanding. Each group member has to understand her position in the group and her relation to particular others, as well as what behavioral expectations follow from these factors. This understanding manifests social self-awareness to the extent that memory is involved. For example, that so-and-so recently groomed me or attacked me. Such understanding also implicates a non-trivial awareness of oneself as persisting over time.